The Research Left Behind with Professor Ashley.
Hello and welcome to The Research Left Behind, the only Twitch stream, YouTube show, and podcast, depending on your mode of access, which sweeps the cutting room floor to bring you the research that got left behind. Hello, and my name is Professor Ashley. I am a real professor who teaches people how to make video games, and tonight I am joined by Dr. Kathryn Kohls. If that name sounds familiar, that's because we've already talked about her work with Dr. Amanda-Rae a few months back while we talked about white streaming Black aesthetics. They were co-authors, and we talked about co-authoring, so that was really fun. But tonight, however, we are talking all about Dr. Kohls' dissertation work, which has been so amazing and super influential. All my future publications, you're going to see Dr. Kohls' name a ton because I have been citing her up a storm. The dissertation's called From Jane Austen to Meghan Markle, The Persistence of British Imperialism in White Popular Feminism. And if you're watching the live stream, you can type !book into the chat to get a link to go and read it for yourself. It's free as a downloadable PDF from the University of Kentucky's website. If you are watching or listening after the fact, please check the episode description for that link. Faculty, staff, students, please join me in saying thank you to Dr. Kohls for being on the show and telling us all about the research she had to leave behind in From Jane Austen to Meghan Markle.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here, and it feels like this conversation is too timely, and I need to get my butt back in the writing chair, so I'm really hoping this conversation propels me forward to do that, because right now it's just sitting as a dissertation, and not a ton of people read dissertations.
Yeah, they should. They really should. We just had a long conversation about that in the DGRA Discord, actually. For me, well, first of all, dissertations are peer reviewed. We're going off script. What am I doing? Indulge me. So for me, dissertations are peer reviewed, right? Because you have multiple reviewers, you have multiple faculty on it. So it's just as valid as any other piece of work. And for me, it's also bleeding edge, right? Like not just cutting edge, but bleeding edge. It's the newest research out there, and in my opinion, the most exciting research as well. But let's get back on script. So before we get started talking about the book, we have our conflict of interest disclosures. That is a joke, by the way. We don't have an HR department. We don't have an institutional review board. We have Nifty Chris, the moderator. So everyone say hi to Nifty Chris and thank him for his moderation duties. But we like to have fun here. So let's talk about how we know each other. Dr. Kohls, do you remember how we met?
We met on Zoom a couple weeks ago, June, I think it was, because you had Dr. Amanda-Rae on, and I had co-authored that chapter with her, and then you are doing some work on fairy balls and Ren fairs, and my research is tangentially related, so we had a great conversation about that work you're doing, and at some point, when I am not ill, I plan to look at the chapter that you sent me and give you thoughts. At least that is the plan. I'm behind on everything this summer and feeling so much guilt, but hopefully everyone will give me forgiveness and I will be productive come August.
Oh, okay. First of all, the fact that you're here is very moving and very touching for me. I'm so sorry that you're ill. You're doing great. My next question relates to what you're doing right now, which is drinking out of your very cool mug. What you drinking?
I'm drinking tea and water. As it's been alluded to, I have been sick, so I am in hydration and recovery phase.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I really do.
It's fine. It is what it is.
I really do appreciate you being here, and at least you're in the phase where you don't sound like a frog.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into the research left behind in From Jane Austen to Meghan Markle. First, belated congratulations. As chat knows, as all the guests on this program know, getting a PhD is torture. It's not very fun. Dissertations are not the greatest thing in the world to write. One of the things that really impressed me about your dissertation is how well it flows, and in my opinion, how easy it could be turned into a book because you have a very strong narrative throughout. But well done on getting the PhD. And I'm going to awkwardly pause as you drink.
Sorry.
Yeah, well done you. The research and writing process is really difficult, so well done. But let's start with the juicy stuff. So can you tell me a bit about how you came into research, white feminism, popular media, and all the fun things, Tradwives, Bridgerton?
Mm-hmm. So I am a first-gen grad student and almost a first-gen college student in general. So there's no background that I came into any of this. And so I had a really strong relationship with my undergrad professors who are a 19th century British lit person and a 19th century American. And so I thought I was going to be a 19th century literature person too. And plot twist, that did not happen. I'm a terrible Victorianist. God bless the Victorianist who helped me through. But so this project, throughout all of the degrees, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a Victorianist, it's going to be great. But in the back of my mind was this problem that I had seen in my undergrad days. I had a friend who was in the same friend group as me, and we weren't close. We didn't agree on almost anything. She was raised super conservative, anti-LGBTQ. I was a budding feminist, trying to figure what that meant, coming from a very rural white background. And again, we did not agree on almost anything, including media, but we both really liked Jane Austen adaptations and that genre. And I was super concerned. I was like, wait, does this mean Jane Austen is problematic? Because I had always seen her as a proto-feminist. And I was like, oh gosh, is this problematic? Can I enjoy this stuff? And then this is around, as I'm ending undergrad, Donald Trump starts his first run for president. And then you have MAGA, who, like, Make America Great Again, is very much in this historical fantasy ideal. And then you have the New York Times and the Chronicle of Higher Ed, like the MAGA and conservatives are claiming Jane Austen, but others say she's a feminist. What is she? And so they were articulating this problem that I had. And I'm like, why are these are too close for comfort, these conversations. And I was, as most teens were in early 20s, chronically online. And the stuff that I really liked was also sometimes used for nefarious purposes. And I'm like, where do I fit? What do I like? Why is like that Jane Austen, this proto-feminist, being used in this way?
Right.
And then I get to be a PhD student, and I'm a terrible Victorianist. God bless my co-chair, who is a traditional Victorianist. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I want to do, why are we obsessed with this century and this culture?
Yep.
And how does it work both ways? Why does it work for conservatives, and why does it work for feminists, particularly white feminists? And so to this day, I am trying to articulate why this young woman and I agreed on Jane Austen, which is I feel like maybe it feels like such a silly way to start, but it really comes from that moment when I was like, is this wrong?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to like this?
That's not a silly way to start at all. I think that makes a lot of sense because there's clearly, I mean, resonating with my own research there's clearly it's art, right? So clearly it's art, and you can look at art and take away different things from it. I think folks who are like you and me walk away with it from reading Austen and going, oh, this is quite, progressive for its time. And I think other people highlight the more regressive aspects of it, right? That's a great answer, though, and I really like how embedded all of our research is in our own lives and experiences. So let's jump right in on that note. On the note of regression, let's talk about Ballerina Farm. I need to get it together. So page 1 of the dissertation, the squeal I scrumped when I read the first page, and front and center, you talk about Ballerina Farm and tradwives. So obviously the second question I'm going to ask you is going to be about this. So tell me a little bit about who Ballerina Farm is for those who may not be chronically online who are listening.
So Ballerina Farm has been named the Queen of the Tradwives, which is a kind of subgenre, a content creator, mostly on Instagram, but on TikTok. And it's usually white women who kind of dress in this historical fantasy, rustic aesthetic, often making food from scratch, raising their horde of children, and kind of inspiring this nostalgia for either like a cottage in a European countryside or on the Great Plains during Manifest Destiny. And so Hannah Nealman has, I think, currently like over 10 million followers. And she was a former Juilliard trained ballerina, hence Ballerina Farm, married to the son of JetBlue co-founder, his son. So you got like this billion-dollar family backing her. I think they have 8 kids at this point, though I might have lost count. They own this massive ranch in Utah because they're also Mormon. And yeah, she is like, all of her posts show her raising her 8 children, maybe dancing in the barnyard, making mozzarella from scratch. And then there's like the key product placement of, oh, you like my apron? Buy it on the Ballerina Farm store. Oh, you want to make breakfast scones? Use the Ballerina Farm protein flour, protein powder. And it is a weird mix of advertising, personal nostalgia, and like family content. Do you think that did her justice? There's so much lore.
There's so much lore, and chat's actually talking about the egg apron.
Okay, egg apron. So for those that don't know, she wanted to go, I think, to Greece for her birthday, and her son of a billionaire husband gets her an egg apron. So an apron that you can stuff with eggs from your coop. And it was supposed to be, I think, a funny haha video, but she looks disappointed, and her husband Daniel gets critiqued on social media. That I think it's one of the few times they don't often point to like the conversation that's going on about them, but this is one of the times I think she had to speak out and like defend her husband, who is called Dimwit Dan on Reddit. Which I find very funny.
Yeah. Fundy snark kind of subreddits are a guilty pleasure of mine. Something that's really interesting that I didn't know before, my experience with tradwife content and Ballerina Farm content is kind of limited to those snarky websites and Fundy Fridays and all those really great programs on YouTube. But you connect in the dissertation the rise in glamorized home agriculture to the pandemic, and you talk about the folks who maybe had the luxury of moving out of cities to suburbs and, you know, speaking of egg aprons, having chicken farms and chicken coops. So I wonder if you can, how did social distancing impact this or pull us toward a rise in conservatism that I think we're still grappling with today?
So it's well documented. I'm not going to do the whole theory thing for long, but it's well documented that when we, as human beings, we experience times of crises, personal or socially, collectively, we often regress to something familiar. And so sometimes that is like, oh, I know how to do this. So like sometimes we regress to bad habits when something goes wrong. Culturally, I think during COVID, we were stuck inside our apartments. We don't know what's going on. Clearly, the government doesn't. Everyone we look to for guidance is kind of failing us. And we're told just to stay home and figure it out. And so if you have wealth, you can move to the countryside or go to another home that is more rural where you have space. But so many of us are kind of locked inside, and many are wishing for that reality. And like sourdough starters were big, and everyone's making sourdough. You also have at that same moment the rise of silky dresses, like the big puff sleeve empire waist. Women were going to parks and like frolicking. And then you have like glamour chicken houses, where like people are getting fowl, and raising them and getting their eggs and naming their chickens. And I saw so many people putting like flower boxes on their chicken coops. And as someone who was raised on a farm, chickens and like fowl, they smell terrible. They're so gross. And like they're super helpful. But I struggled. I'm like, this is not for me. But other people loved it. And so I think we're just scared and unsure. And so we're like, well, this gives me purpose. I have time at home, so I might as well be productive. So now I have time to take care of puppies or chickens, ducks, a garden, a sourdough starter. Yeah. So we just kind of panicked, and this was something, or we watched other people do it. I did not do any of those things, but I watched other people, and I was invested in their sourdough's growth at times, which feels so silly now, but in 2020, when the world feels like it was ending, it was great content.
Right? And one of the, this is a sociologist in me, but when we hear when we think, I mean, you're spot on, right? Your assessment of the pandemic is completely spot on. What's wild to me is that capitalism took a little pause in a very literal way. Where I lived, it was a 2-week quarantine. Your mileage may vary, but we took a little pause on the old capitalism. And the takeaway point for some people, when we paused from capitalism, we had the time to have chickens, to have sourdough starters, because we're working from home, so we could do things in between meetings, or go have a picnic in the park. But the takeaway for some folks isn't, wow, I think capitalism's the problem. The takeaway is, let's go back to when capitalism was even more severe and things were even worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So you mentioned
like feminism lied, and now I have to do 2 jobs. No, capitalism is trying to make you do 2 jobs. But sure, blame feminism. That's the problem here.
Right, exactly. Oh boy. Okay, so you talk about, you mentioned watching people's sourdough starters and being emotionally involved in them. So tell me about your research process. You've presumably followed folks on social media. You followed conservative content creators. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I tried to make burner accounts, but then it was also an ethics thing, about like if creators, especially smaller creators, they don't know who's following them. And depending how deep I got, some people, like I got blocked because they didn't know who I was. And then there was a problem of switching back and forth. So it got messy. So I was like, fine, we're just going to go straight forward. I'll just follow them on my mains and see what I see and track the narrative from there, which has its problems, including like I had to take breaks and kind of cleanse myself and post dissertation defense, cleansed my feed. And I was like, a lot of these people, I can't follow them every day. I can check in on them periodically, and I do. But couldn't do it. They did get called out. I had a friend from a former part of life who did not know what I was doing my dissertation on. And she was like, why are you following these conservative Christians? Like, Katie, are you okay? And I had to laugh and I had to be like, I promise I haven't gone off the deep end. I mean, not that deep end. I've gone off the deep end of dissertation writing and I'm following all these random people. But I promise I'm not subscribing to that philosophy. I just need to know what they're saying and what they're peddling. And she's like, oh, that makes more sense. I was really worried for a second.
That's very funny and something I think we, hadn't considered of how this would impact your relationship with other people. And like, bless your friend for checking in on you. That's really kind of them to do. One of
She was sweet.
one of the kind of through lines, I suppose, in the dissertation throughout Tradwives and Jane Austen and Meghan Markle and everyone who bought chickens during the pandemic is this support of white supremacy and patriarchy that is either explicit. I think there's been some investigative journalism onto Ballerina Farm and some of those tradwife influencers that says, actually, no, they do know what they're doing and they're being very calculated. They have financial backing to make effectively propaganda about how wonderful their lives are as mothers and as stay-at-home moms and how they're rejecting feminism and look how much happier they are. With their egg aprons. Sorry, that was petty. Which is wild for many reasons, but one of the reasons is because women typically, with some notable exceptions, do not benefit from white supremacy and do not benefit. Even white women don't benefit from white supremacy, right? No one benefits. It's a really oppressive, horrible system. So how do social media accounts, how do works of fiction like Jane Austen, how do contemporary works of fiction like Bridgerton support and uphold white supremacy when their primary audience are people who do not benefit from white supremacy?
So complicated question that I will try to do my best. But the simplest answer, white supremacy is really sneaky and really good at kind of bending narratives to fit whatever they need to. For those of us that know, who gets to be white in at least the U.S. context has changed because it was we need to include more people to make sure this thing keeps going. So Irish, Italians, they all get subsumed by whiteness at some point. And so it's really clever rhetorically about bending these narratives to fit its own purpose. And so something like a Bridgerton, created by Shonda Rhimes as a multiracial cast, and does really great things with allowing non-white viewers access to the escapism that many white audiences have had in historical media for a long time. But that choice of explaining why are races equal? Why is there no racism in this world? Also then in a white supremacist reading was racism, it's just a bad personal failing of an individual. It is not a system. It's not something that multiple people have to actively buy into to keep going. And it's unfortunate, but that white supremacy works that way. Or like a Jane Austen, depending how you read that narrative, or how even you read someone like her life, if you know she's proto-feminist, here's all the ways that her work is radical. But then for those that maybe don't know or don't care, it's it's an easy, happy ending between a white man and a white woman, and they're procreating to continue the empire. And with literally,
sorry,
and ideologically,
that's just
that is the promise.
Every Disney film prior to 2010 and every romance novel I've ever read has just been ruined by that sentence: procreating to support the empire.
Truly, happily ever after has like a ... at the end, like, oh yeah, they're gonna go have sex and have white babies.
Yeah.
Very sorry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and influencers, these travelers are also using that. They're and somewhat playing on that we don't that oh like oh they're just silly women. They don't know enough. They're not smart enough. I'm like, no, this is really sinister. And they know what they're doing. They're very smart rhetorically. And even I've had academics who kind of side eye the work I do. And it's like, oh, they're just stupid women. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're very smart women. And that's the bad part.
Yeah. 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 I'm going to say yeah a lot because, yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the happy endings of colonialism. And now that I say it out loud, I realize there's a double meaning, and I'm going to show myself out. No, I'll stay on the program. So something that had always bothered me, but I lacked the language to articulate until reading your dissertation, is this idea of why is Disney bad, or why are these stories, and I'm not going to pick on the mouse, right? But the happily ever after, the compulsory heterosexuality is annoying, but maybe not as sinister. Once we start elevating it to this kind of mythic story, that's where, as you point out, that's where it starts getting sinister. So you write in your book, I'm going to just read this quote because I thought it was beautifully written. So when you're talking about Bridgerton, you're talking about homesteading as we've just done now. You say, we are given the same happy endings that white women were given in colonialism, meaning marriage, right? You secure marriage to a wealthy man. And we are being used in similar ways to uphold those hierarchies and harms. Can you say more about how there's a connection between race, gender, and media, and how we are raised to value certain configurations of couplehood or of people as the happy ending, versus Ariel, my favorite, staying single and taking over her father's throne. Go read my fan fiction. No, I'm kidding. Bless you for laughing at that terrible joke.
Yeah. We'll move on. Question at hand. But so I thought about this a lot because I grew up with only sisters, and so I at least growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, it was Barbies and Disney. Like, that is the media that we, for the most part, were given. And that's totally fine. I still love the animated Barbie movies. And there's I've gotten to sound the Barbie side of TikTok where other millennial women are like, yes. But in the ending of all of those, Barbie marries the prince, or the princess gets the man, and that is the narrative we are given and have been given for a long time. And so, in the 1990s, I would say we get kind of this post-feminist, and then into 2010s, we can argue about waves of feminism. And so we do get some narratives that push back on that, or nuance that are complicated. But almost always, to reach happily ever after, to have a happy ending for our protagonist, they need to end with a suitable partner, which is almost always male and almost always white. And even in stuff created by really compelling filmmakers or creators, they're kind of stuck in the same way that Jane Austen was. Jane Austen herself was a single woman who was making her wealth and her fame off her own writing, never married. But if she was going to write a happy ending for her heroines that people were going to want to read, she had to marry them off. And within a capitalist structure where media needs to make money to continue being made, we're under the very similar constraints. most heroines don't end up alone. And I don't know if you are on the samurai turned pretty side of TikTok or social media, but I feel like millennial women are ready to riot if the heroine in that series doesn't end up with her expected boy by the end. They're like, if she gives us some bullshit ending where she's going to be her own empowered woman by herself, I will flip a table.
That's so funny. People were also really salty about K-pop Demon Hunters because the main character in that, I mean, spoilers, I guess, but the main character in that ends up alone. I won't spoil how, but yeah, people are really upset that the main male character didn't end up with her.
Yeah, we have this expectation that that's what is needed for a happy ending. And it's not sinister all the time. But if that is our only happy ending given to us as women, and then we feel insufficient or we're seen as insufficient if we don't find that in our own personal lives, it's a problem. And it becomes a problem because then, again, we're procreating to reproduce white supremacy, or we're not, as we see from the current political climate that so wants us to get married and start having babies, even if their ways they're doing it doesn't make a lot of sense, but
yeah,
they need us to have babies apparently.
Yeah, without any kind of economic support or like childcare or any, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, so we quickly get into like, this is fun, Disney princess, to like, oh no, they are ready just to force us to procreate.
Yeah.
So it was fun, and now it's not.
Yep, and I'm doing the thing again where I'm just going, yep, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I don't like being right.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. It's really, it's really awful.
I laugh. I don't know how to cope. That's fine.
I always think of Ralph Wiggum when he laughs and goes, haha, I'm in danger, when it's just like this nervous response to just soul-crushing doom. On that note, something incredibly insightful that I was wondering for a really long time, as someone who's lived in England, this sounds so bad. I will never be given a tourist visa ever again, but okay, let me back up. I love Hallmark movies. I know they're bad. I know they're bad for my brain. I know that they're bad for my soul. But I find them endlessly entertaining and sappy and saccharine and fine. So often a trope in those movies and also in romance novels is a foreign but not too foreign main love interest. So you get a lot of Scottish, you get a lot of Irish, you get a lot of British folks. And audiences go wild for it, right? Especially historical dramas. And something that never quite made sense to me is that in the United States, we have such a strong national identity and we produce so much media content that why is there this strong lust for British historical dramas or British actors playing these sexy male leads in shows? And your dissertation finally gave me my answer, which you talk about how in American history from colonialism is shorter. Indigenous history, like, people were here, right? But we are taught that we ignore that part of history in American education.
We start in 1776 and we move forward. Yep.
Saying yep again because that's all I can say to smother my rage. So the history that is there from 1776 and onwards, this white colonial history, includes slavery. And it is, as your book details, not an appropriate setting, obviously, to have a romantic novel. Well, I mean, Gone with the Wind did it, right? So it's been done, but it's not great. There's a lot of darkness in American history. So your dissertation points out that, well, escaping to the UK allows us to guilt-free indulge in this kind of historical romance. So I was hoping that you could say more on that, because I'm sure I butchered everything clever that you said.
I don't think you did. I think you represented it pretty well. Yeah, so one of the key parts about, like, if we're going to lean into like the white woman fantasy historical, there is often a level of comfort that we want. Like Bridgerton, we have aristocracy. Sometimes it's you're going to be a princess, thinking of like The Prince and Me. We don't do well when we want silly fantasy. If we want my personal family was a bunch of German peasants, but we're not going to talk about. No one wants to go back there. So when we want to play with that, we need to be selective about where we're going. And if we're going back to like American aristocracy, usually that translates either to slavery and Southern like debutantes in the antebellum period, but then we have slavery. And now I think the Gilded Age kind of complicates this a little bit, but even that they're trying to talk about like, no, these are robber barons and they're bad, they're like bad billionaires, they're bad people. But as Americans, we are somewhat justifiably, we're less knowledgeable of European history and colonialism. So it's like, oh, the Scottish Highlands, why not? There's no Black people there. We don't have to think about complicated feelings of racism and how we are part of the problem. We can just have this like fairy tale-esque world. Like Cinderella didn't have Native Americans in it. We're fine. And so, yeah, it just allows for at least for the white woman to have a more easy transition into that escapism, and in ways that, even though if you know British colonialism, like, you know that's in the background, but it's not in your face as if you were like a Gone with the Wind. I lost my train of thought. Did that answer your question?
No, it totally did. And you also touched on something else I found really interesting for folks who don't know history. There's this, I don't know, people's brains are really short, and our memories are very short, is what I mean to say. There's this idea or perception that people just didn't travel prior to airplanes. Right? So funny to say, but I mean, that's patently untrue. And so it's interesting for a program like Bridgerton to involve people of color, especially, this is the height of the British Empire, when the British Empire was growing because of the abuse of colonized and enslaved people, to be absolutely clear. But there were people of different backgrounds and different colors in England at the time, so arguably a not just better representation in terms of, we want actors of color to have work, and it's good to see people of different skin tones on television. I mean, I like looking at different people. I think that's entertaining, even on a basic, kind of aesthetic level, but also in terms of historical accuracy. But as you mentioned, and this is what I wanted to follow up on, that it can be really problematic in how slavery and colonialism are dealt with. And in your dissertation, you talk about season 2 of Bridgerton in particular, with Anthony and Kate? Yes. It's been a minute since I saw that season, but that season 2 is actually, no, I think season 1's probably my favorite. I also went and read all the books, so I had to find out what happens between seasons. I love Bridgerton. But yeah, so say a little bit about that, because Shonda Rhimes is well respected as a creative person, and her creative direction, I think, really sets the show apart, but not completely unproblematically.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Again, I haven't read my own dissertation in a minute about season 2 specifically. But yeah, Bridgerton, I think, does it better than most, and I think has a more diverse audience in mind, and that's part of why. But then, yeah, the like Queen Charlotte storyline stuff gets twisted, and love Golda Roosevelt, but I hate how people who want it to be an all-white show comment on her online. So can you remind me like a little bit more about season 2 in particular?
Oh, well, you mentioned that the issue a lot of viewers of color have with these programs is that it's difficult to imagine yourself. I mean, Frozen is such a great example of my kid's obsessed with it, and I'm like, there are literally no people of color here. I can't imagine, trying to explain that to a child, which is historically inaccurate and also really problematic for American audiences. So Bridgerton does a great job in involving actors of color, but they just ignore the class inequalities that would have been prevalent during the reign of King George. They try to explain that a little bit. There's one scene, you put the text, the dialogue text in this one scene from season 1, actually, in which Simon, the Duke of Hastings, is having a conversation with Lady Danbury, and he's basically says, well, when King George married Queen Charlotte, who is mixed race or black, I can't remember what they say in the show, that kind of resolved. Now people who are like us can be nobility, and that just that one small little interaction hand waves away, and for good reason. And you point out that that's allows audiences of color to join in this fantasy that white women have been able to enjoy for years and years and years. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say on that?
I think if people want to know more about that particular thing, Tressie McMillan Cottom has I think some Medium articles about like the Black Ton, which is like their like aristocracy social scene, and then Amanda-Rae Prescott. Both of them have talked about like being fans of color of period pieces. So they say much smarter things than I can. From a white woman's perspective, this really easy, like, oh, this is why there's racial equality. Like because of love, it turns a systemic issue historically into one that can be easily fixed by like one good person with power, and negates these complicated histories, and that these systems that again multiple people have to continually work to uphold. And so then you have an accidental, I think, continuation of a more colorblind philosophy of like, well, I'm okay. I'm a good white person. Right. So it's not a personal problem for me. And so like, I love that they do that to allow audiences of color greater access to the escapism. But then, yeah, white audiences also allowed them to like poo-poo the racism and colonialism issues, at least did for many from my research.
Perfect. So let's talk about Meghan Markle. So we've had so much fun that the clock is running out. So I'm gonna skip to Meghan Markle because we have an American princess, right? Which is very exciting. But reading through the dissertation, Meghan Markle is American in the sense that she's also raised within a system of white supremacy and of patriarchy, and so I feel awful in a lot of ways for her because she is set up in a system where she just can't win. So I want to talk a bit about how Meghan Markle in your research has worked to uphold British imperialism, especially as a biracial woman.
Okay, sorry, you cut off at the end, but I think I got what you meant. So Meghan Markle, before, like pre-Prince Harry, very much a popular feminist, like woman influencer. Like she grows up middle class in California, becomes kind of an early influencer on a blog, I'm blanking what it's called. She gained some notoriety in Suits, and then is also using her platform to advocate for mostly women and girls in precarious positions, whether in America or elsewhere. Um, but from my understanding, she never really harshly critiques the systems that like led to that inequality. She's just like, oh, these women and girls are deserving, we should lift them up. So very much like a white feminism that works kind of in the middle of the road, isn't going to ruffle too many feathers. Well, then she like starts dating Prince Harry, and while I don't think, from what I know of the British royal family, I don't think they would have chose her, but they're like, well, he's an adult and he's going to marry her. And I think they, like the PR machine, was like, well, I guess we'll use a feminist princess to make ourselves look good.
Right.
And I think they wanted to curb her further. And she was like, no, this platform will allow me to do more.
Right.
And again, she's not radical. She's not a radical feminist by almost any standard, unless you are super conservative, which the royal family is. And so they butt heads. So they think they try very hard tried very hard that, look, we have a feminist princess, we are accepting of all races, we're gonna like help the Commonwealth countries that we have colonized see themselves in her, and so they feel included in their own exploitation. And it doesn't fly. It doesn't work. But I think they're too racist and too stuck in their own way that they don't know. And so I think Meghan Markle was probably somewhat game for that she was willing to continue her, like, what her kind of feminist pieces, but they weren't going to let her do as much as she wanted, and she thought she could do more. And then they don't like, historically, women who don't fall in line with the rules. And when they revoked their security, I think they were like, well, she's more useful to us as a martyr than anything, which is quite dark. They've, like, the British royal family, the monarchy, the British Empire has always been willing to exploit the lives and bodies of people of color for their own gains, and I think this was a continuation of that. Now I think she's doing pretty, like, I think she's pretty smart. I'm not saying I love everything about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, but like, to go up against the British royal family to survive and now be thriving as like a content creator and influencer, girl's got chops, and I applaud her for that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see as she continues like to create content and have her influencer era, what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that was really insightful in the dissertation to think through precisely, you know, as Chat's saying, almost like Princess Diana, right? As well, that who's quite literally a martyr to the empire. Poor Meghan Markle. I hope she's doing well. So I want to.
She's doing well.
I know. Well, I mean, she's privileged in a lot of ways, but also had a lot of horrible things happen. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, so my whole exposure to Meghan and Harry, and most of the topics that we've covered tonight are through tabloids, sleazy subreddits, and in part of your dissertation, you actually cite tabloids. And I love that because it shows your resourcefulness. There's some folks I've encountered in my career as an academic who have this kind of, you know, we should only cite peer-reviewed sources. If you're citing a tabloid, what you're doing is you're platforming a tabloid. Yes, that is true. And do I want to platform tabloids? No, of course not. They can do a lot of really invasive and harmful things to people. However, what do people know about Meghan and Harry? Let me tell you, as someone who has seen the tabloids at the newsstand at the grocery checkout, they're in tabloids. So making use of a tabloid, I think, is super resourceful and also is very much in touch with what people will know about this topic. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. This is very meta, but if you had to give advice to PhD students or master's students on when it is appropriate to do something like cite a tabloid, what would you say?
I think it's pretty free if you're doing as a primary source, which for this I was, because I could not find the Oprah interview with Meghan and Harry anywhere. It was not on streaming. It's social media, the internet stuff goes away all the time. And so the tabloid had the transcript, and as far as I was concerned, it was close to the notes that I had taken. So I had to take a leap of faith, and I explained that in a footnote. Be like, this is why. I don't love it, but this is the option I have. But primary source, I think you can get away with more. But I do think that, like, I had to cite some TikTokers and Instagram content creators because they have very insightful criticism, and I cited them as secondary sources. And I think you have to have that foundation of theory and who your committee will respect first, because the dissertation or thesis is very much sometimes I was rereading pieces of it and I'm like, oh, I'm so defensive. But I'm like, well, this is kind of defensive. I have to prove that I can do this work, that I can add something tangible. And so I over-explain at times that I'm like, no, they're an influencer, but they have like the pulse of what is going on. And there is no peer review source, at least at that point, on Book Talk. There was nothing about romance and Book Talk and Bridgerton. And so here's where these align with existing theorists or existing peer-reviewed sources. And I think if you can do that, at least scholars like you and maybe me will respect that work. And there might be people who don't, but you're not writing for them.
Yeah.
And you're not going to please anyone. But if you can please yourself and at least please your committee so you can pass, you're good.
Yeah, I think there's also a component that I think not everyone agrees with, but there's a component of conservation that you're doing because social media can be ephemeral at times, where this Book Talk account that is posting these wonderful critiques is suddenly gone. That content creator stopped streaming, or whatever it is, right? But you have some sort of documentation that this was a thing, trademark, because too often, right, we're reinventing wheels, we're covering the same ground again and again. People like to claim novelty and say, well, no one's ever done this before, and in some cases it appears that they're correct, because if you try and search for a particular topic on social media sites, like if TikTok goes down, for example, we're going to lose a lot of data, personal data certainly, but also information about culture and art. So I think you're doing good work, even if they are tabloids or are social media accounts. Okay, so we are on the last question, which is, tell me about the research left behind from Jane Austen to Meghan Markle. What did you have to cut for length? Did you go down any researcher rabbit holes while you were writing, spend a whole day in the library, and then go, well, that's not going anywhere? What's in your discard pile, so to speak?
So thankfully I got to include most in the dissertation, because I was able to cover so much ground and talk about these different pieces. But like, I would love to talk more about like 1990s post-feminist like rom-coms and how those fit in, and like the Austen mania of the 1990s. I got to touch on it. But that, and then the literary web series of the 2010s where like people were like being Lizzie Bennet and vlogging her life on YouTube and then tweeting as her.
Like, I did not know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, like Hank Green of the Vlog Brothers.
Yeah.
He produced the Lizzie Bennet Diaries in like 2012, 2013. They won a Creative Emmy, but then it inspired all of these like basically Tumblr nerds. It's very like twee coded, which I have like theories on, but maybe I'll write it someday. But yeah, there were so many, like Peter Pan and Wendy and the March Sisters, Frankenstein, and yeah, they were vlogging as modern day literary characters. Sometimes they had like Twitter accounts and Tumblr accounts, and they were posting and cross posting. It was very fun. But I think I maybe footnoted it at some point. But yeah, I have so many thoughts. about that era of content.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I was doing my own graduate work in that time. We have a couple minutes left, and so I wanted to ask one more question, if I may, which is we've kind of alluded to, and your Lizzie Bennet story just made me think of it, but we alluded to Jane Austen, but we haven't explicitly talked about how her work contributes. And maybe now's your chance to talk about the resurgence of 90s films that were very much centered in Austen's world, or at least in similar time period context. So how does Jane Austen's work uphold British imperialism, white supremacy, all those things?
Mm-hmm. I think, like so many things that we've talked about, I don't know if it's intentional. Like, I can't read Jane Austen's mind. But again, she's being really progressive in many ways, that she has these literally obstinate, headstrong girls who find these happy endings that are economically secure with partners who genuinely like them. And there is like some romantic tension for, again, Regency period, dad ankle. But but now we've lost kind of that nuance. And so she also gets twisted, and it's now just about the happy ending and like submitting to your rich husband, and you get to stay home and run the estate and have the babies. And so, yeah. And I think one of the things that Austen Mania, like something like Clueless and Bridget Jones' Diary, and then the literary web series, I think those help capture that, again, that obstinate, headstrong girl that you deserve a loving partner who makes you feel secure, but also you're allowed to be your own human and pursue your own dreams. And that was a bit wild at the time, and it feels like sometimes it's still wild today, unfortunately. Yep. But yeah, I think there's something about that that's really appealing to specifically young women who are trying to figure out their space in the world and what that looks like, and want permission. So yeah, it's unfortunate that others use it then to be like, nope, you're gonna get married and have babies, and that's all you're good for, and that's all you should aspire to. Because there is a richness to those texts, and great familial and feminine kinship and friendship that makes those stories, I think, continue to have significance that get overlooked. And when we flatten them for like a Make America Great Again, or live this very subscriptive life again. That'll Can I answer the question?
Yeah, no, that was a really good summary of everything we talked about tonight that I think leaves us on a very, now it's late, a very...
a positive note, but it's a note.
No, yeah, it's not positive, but it's like a fulfilled. We ticked all the boxes. We came here to learn about these things, and we've definitely learned about these things. We've learned about trad wives. We learned about Jane Austen. We learned about Bridgerton. We learned about Meghan Markle. We learned about your PhD dissertation, which is phenomenal, by the way. Please do go and read it. So that is, we're 1 minute over the 1 hour mark. So it is time to say goodbye to the stream and each other. But please join me in thanking Dr. Kohls for her time, patience, and dissertation. Also for being here while ill. That is a feat that, a very admirable feat indeed. Kathryn, do you have anything you would like to plug? Any new publications?
Unfortunately, no. I wish I did. But job marketing and everything else, and a summer filled with illness. I hope soon I will have something from this dissertation that I can plug. But at the moment, just keep looking. And if you looking out for my stuff, and if you're interested or have questions, feel free to email me. I'm not hard to find on the internet.
Do you have any social media pages that you want to plug? Any Blue Sky or anything like that?
I don't use Blue. I have a Blue Sky, but I don't really use it. And my Instagram at one point it was open, but men got creepy, and so I locked it down. So it's if you want to reach me, and it's Kathryn Kathryn .Kohls Kohls at uky.edu. That is my professional email. Just email me there if you have questions or want to talk about any of this. Or just cite me and or send me your stuff and I'll read it because I love talking about this and would love more conversations about it.
Men Got Creepy could be the subtitle of this program, unfortunately. So thank you so much again to Shawn, Pierre, and Adrianna Poindexter for the creation and use of our theme song, to Nifty Chris, our Twitch mod, for classroom management, and to you, the viewers and listeners. Without all of you, this production would not be possible. Listeners, viewers, chatters, if you like this stream, this VOD, this podcast, please make sure you are following with notifications on so that you know when we are live again and when new episodes go out. If you're listening after the fact, you can head over to twitch.tv/professor_Ashley and follow to catch the next stream live. You can also find me on almost all social media as professor_Ashley. The Research Left Behind will be live again on August 7th. That is one day after my birthday, with our season 1 finale. Nifty Chris, our beloved mod, will be my special guest, and we will effectively be interviewing each other. This is Nifty Chris's face reveal, which is also Nifty Chris Twitch streams, like not the biggest face reveal, but hey, you get to meet your mod, which I think is important. We're going to talk about the Research Left Behind production process. We like to be meta on this channel, as I'm sure you've gathered, so we're going to discuss the research that got left behind, the research left behind. After that, we're going to take a small hiatus to research and write, and we will resume with season 2 starting in October. If you aren't already on the Discord, you can type !Discord in chat and get the link to join. I post in the Discord when I'm going live, and I'll be posting updates on our special guests, so on and so forth, so you can stay up to date on the program and when season 2 will start. Thank you again, Kathryn, and good night, everyone. We will see you on August 7th. Bye.